Assalamu alaikum. I hope everybody just hearing me. Assalamu alaikum. يا ريت كل اللي حاضرين يكونوا سامعيننا. بنرحب بكم في الويبينار الخاص بأكاديمية نسيج، وبنحب نرحب بمارشال بريدنج. ومارشال بريدنج زي ما بيقولوا كده دايما it's easy to find. هو اختصاصي مشهور جدا في مجال تكنولوجيا المعلومات وتحديدا نظم المكتبات وتقييمها، وليه كتابات ومؤلفات كثيره في الموضوع دوت. وهو كمان الفاوندر والمؤسس وناشر خاص بالجايد لايبرري تكنولوجي، وهو كان دايركتور سابق ل Innovative Technology and Research موجودة في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. ومش عايز اخد وقت كثير جدا من موعد التوقيت المخصص للويبينار. ف I will welcome Marshall and give him the lead to start this one because we have a lot of things to get. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. Okay. So I'm delighted to be here today, this afternoon for you, this morning for me, to talk to you about technology skills for those of you who work in a modern library. So give me just a minute and I'll share my screen with you. Okay, so again, I just want to start off by saying thank you to Naseej for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm delighted to be associated with Nasiej Academy, this important nonprofit initiative to be able to share knowledge and information with librarians and other information professionals in the region. So I'm glad to be part of that. I previously taught a workshop as part of Nasiej Academy, and I'm looking forward to being able to contribute to the Nasiej Academy blog and other kinds of ways that I can share information. I'm just delighted to be able to be in contact with those of you in the region. So I've been asked to speak about topics related to kind of professional development and gaining knowledge that you need in order to be successful in your career. So my perspective is technology. I'm not an organizational or management consultant. I'm a technology consultant. So what I want to do today is just kind of give you some guidance, some tips, some information on the techniques and strategies that I think have been helpful to me, and I hope will be helpful to you, as you think about these kinds of issues. So naturally, libraries and similar organizations are very much reliant on technology. Some in the library manage technology and do it every day. A lot of others use technology provided by others. So I want to today go through a number of topics that will help us think about these issues. In broad terms, this is the agenda that I have in mind, that we can think of kind of broad career strategies. What do you need to be thinking about as you develop your career? What can I do now in order to have opportunities later on? Being technology focused, it's important to think about, well, what are the current trends that we're seeing in technology, and what are some resources that you might turn to keep up your knowledge in the realm of technology? To what extent you need to build expertise? What are the topics? How technical do you want to develop your, how much technical knowledge you want to incorporate into your career? And then how do you want to approach leadership? Do you want to be more involved in kind of leading the development of technology, leading strategy of technology, being involved in the leadership of the organization itself at a higher level. So there's all of these possibilities that you can think about related to this topic. So I understand that libraries in different regions of the world are organized differently, and I think that applies to technology as well. There are a lot of different ways that technology positions are organized in libraries. This is some of the ones that I see. You know, the classic position relating technology in an academic or public library is often called a systems librarian, and these are the individuals who practice technology, who are able to implement technology in ways that are specific to the requirements of the library. How, you know, that they often are involved in managing an integrated library system, providing the infrastructure for the library's website, and all the other kind of library-specific applications that are needed to support a library. So that's a really common position in the U.S. and in Europe and other places that I've kind of looked at libraries. There's also kind of administration of technology. Who are the kind of senior leaders in the library responsible for technology? Often there's an assistant university librarian that is responsible for information technology, for systems, and usually it may encompass other departments as well. But this is the person who's kind of thinking of not only the day-to-day management of the people who are supporting technology, but probably working on technology strategies for the organization and an advisory role to the chief librarian of the organization. This also might be in the form of a department head of a systems office. Again, it just depends on how your organization is organized. There are different levels of positions as well. I mean, libraries also bring in a lot of folks that may not have training in library school, but rather come into the profession from a different direction, where they're a professional system software architect. You know, they're a programmer. You know, they have technology skills, and then they're being asked to apply them into the library context. So I guess what I want to say is it goes both directions. You can have library training and learn the technology side, or you can have technology training and, you know, come in and learn the library side. And I think that's an interesting combination. You know, do you want to require that all positions have, you know, formal library training, or are you willing to bring in technology folks that will then you know, learn library values and organization and requirements and that kind of thing. So what are some career strategies that you might be thinking about? So the way that I approach my career, and that I think works well broadly, is that in a way you're working in two parallel paths. One is that you have a job to do in your institution, and it's your job to do whatever you can do to fulfill your, you know, your role in the library and that organization to make it more successful. You know, excellence of work, you know, kind of do everything that's asked of you and beyond in order to be able to apply your skills and knowledge and talent in order to be able to help that institution be successful. You know, you can be promoted based on your work within your own institution. Hopefully there are opportunities to move up into higher levels of responsibility and authority and expectation within your own institution. So all that's good. That's a lot to do in itself, and for many that is the focus of their career. But I think it's also helpful to think about your career beyond your institution. What is my role within the profession of librarianship? within the profession of information science. So that, yeah, you're doing your job that's expected of you within the institution, but you're also working on cultivating a career, within the broader profession. That the reputation that you build, the way that you contribute to professional organizations, and all of that is also something to that will enhance your career as you move forward. Many find advancement not by moving up through the ranks within their own institution, but by opportunities they may get at another institution to come in at a higher level of responsibility and so forth. I would say in a lot of places in the US, as an example, that's often the way that you move up in the library world as you kind of take the next position in another university at a higher level of responsibility. So you have to think about your career broadly that way, I think, so that you have a national or international portfolio and reputation that you can carry with you as you apply your skills in different contexts and different organizations as you move up in the profession over the course of your career. Being a career and it will span 2 or 3 or 4 decades, and it's important to think strategically about that, within your institution and within the broader profession. So I think that's an important way to look at it. So again, my area is technology. I want to help you think about what it is, kind of what's needed in order to be successful as a technologist, is one way to put it. As a systems librarian, if your position has a large component related to technology, what are some of the things you need to think about in order to be a stronger professional in that way? I think that technology of all parts of the library is one where you need to really have specific expertise. It's important to understand kind of how technology works broadly and how technology is implemented in various contexts specifically. It is a kind of knowledge-based niche within the library profession. You kind of need to know concepts and techniques and even specific applications in many cases in order to be successful. Even if you're managing, if you're managing technologists, I think it's important for you, for those managers to have a good understanding of the technology that the individuals that they manage are applying daily. It's important that you apply technology in a way that supports the institution, that you as a technologist kind of understand the strategies and the mission and the direction of the library, so that you can apply technology, so you can shape technology and develop the technical infrastructure that will help the institution be successful. So it's hard to do that in a vacuum. In fact, this is something that I often see, is that you have really talented and smart technical folks working in the library, but they don't really know how to design it specifically for the library because they are not thinking about what's different about libraries, what's this library doing, and so forth. So I think it helps a lot when you're able to operate at that higher level. It's good to have as broad a knowledge as you can. Within the role of different roles of technology in the library, there are a lot of specializations, but I also think it's very helpful to have knowledge in many different areas of technology. If you're the one who manages the integrated library system, it's important to know things about kind of web infrastructure and XML and those kinds of things. Just know as much as you can to have a broad knowledge spanning multiple areas, because everything has to do with everything, I think, in technology. The more you know, the deeper your knowledge is, the more successful you'll be. So that said, I also think it's good to kind of have your own area of specialization. Find the one aspect of technology that's kind of most interesting and exciting to you, and learn as much about that as you possibly can, because as you learn the details of that specialization, you'll likewise kind of have an understanding of how other specialized areas work as well. When you kind of think about the different layers of the technology stack and so forth, as you apply it to one area of functionality or application, it really works well for others as well. And naturally, you've got to keep that knowledge fresh. You know, continuous renewal of your expertise is just absolutely required, because, you know, this is a change-driven profession. The technology in which libraries, the society is immersed, just changes very rapidly. I can think of, you know, the vast changes in technology that have happened, you know, in the course of my career. You know, at the time I started, you know, it was the age of mainframe computers and punch cards. So it's important that with every step along the way, you pick up what's new about technology today. You know, as you learn that cloud computing is an example I'll give later, is important. Learn about that. Make sure that you understand, you know, what's different about it compared to what you might be using today. Changes in technology are driven and have a lot to do with kind of organizational changes and changes in society around us. You know, think about the impact that social networking has had on society in general, and you know, the way that the mission of universities and libraries change over time. You know, they do change over time, and it's important to be aware of that, and not cling to the way that things were when you entered the profession. There are times when things change pretty dramatically. You know, the word paradigm shift is sometimes overly used, but they, you know, these kinds of major changes do happen over time. An example I would say is that we're in a fundamental change now, moving from kind of locally implemented technology to cloud-based technology. So that's a pretty big change, and it has massive implications for the way that libraries use technology and the way that professionals implement technology. And as I said, I mean, if you stick around, you, in the course of your career, will see multiple ones of these changes in the cycle of technology. I know that I have. So, you know, what are, just to mention a couple of technology trends. You know, I can mention things today, but don't chisel them in stone, because they will be different in 5 years, in 10 years, in 2 years from now. But again, just to give some examples of the kinds of changes that you need to be aware of, and the current trends that you can focus on today, knowing that there will be different things to focus on in the next phase of your career. So this one I've mentioned, cloud computing. I think it's a big deal. That over time, more and more of the systems that we use in application will be implemented through kind of web-based subscriptions, as opposed to software that will be installed in the library itself. Naturally, this is something that will happen in some parts of the world faster than others, but it's a pervasive trend in the consumer arena, in the business arena, and, you know, certainly the library realm will see this change as well, already is. So there's a lot to be aware of in that. You know, this is something that I wrote a small book on a few years ago, Cloud Computing for Libraries. Again, not that you know, that's the best resource, but again, it shows kind of my emphasis on that being an important trend to pay attention to. Likewise, mobile computing. In some parts of the world, that is the primary way of getting access to computer applications is through phones and tablets. You know, we're quickly moving from an arena where kind of the full-size desktop and laptop computers are the way that individuals get access to information and content and features that they want from their organizations. The Internet of Things, another important topic where the devices that are in our homes and our offices and business and factories are all on the internet. They all have IP addresses. They all have ways of talking to each other, being controlled through different kinds of even voice activated systems and collecting all kinds of data. So this is a huge emerging type of infrastructure that we see, you know, floating in the consumer marketplace, and I think that presents opportunities for libraries. You know, having things like Google Home and Alexa and Siri are kind of all becoming of peak interest, I think, because of the way that they give you control over the internet connected devices that surround you in your business and home. So, an important topic. I don't have time to go into the details of each of these topics, but just kind of highlight the kinds of things that are happening in the broader realm of consumer and business technology that have implications on our careers. Within the library realm, there are likewise cycles of trends that are happening that need to be paid attention to. Especially for academic libraries, the emerging category of library services platforms has been a pretty fundamental change for academic libraries in many parts of the world. Broad-based discovery services are must-have kinds of interfaces for academic libraries, many types of public libraries, and so forth. You know, that even integrated library systems are increasingly implemented through hosting arrangements where the library isn't housing and managing the server that the systems run on, but rather is handing that off to some third party, often the vendor who supplies the software or distributes the software in the region to be able to kind of manage the infrastructure. We're at a time where we see both open source and proprietary software coexisting, and both are, in my view, valid approaches to providing software and services for libraries. And it's important to be aware of the differences and the commonalities between these two approaches to software. It's a both a tension and synergy, I think, that is part of the library realm. When it comes to deploying modern websites, there are things that you have to pay attention to. We talked earlier about how mobile technology is so essential these days. So, you know, any public-facing interface that a library-related organization deploys needs to be friendly to that. You know, we call that responsive design, where the system will work well. You know, not just adequately, but, you know, will work well regardless whether it's being used through a smartphone, a tablet, a desktop computer, or a even larger screen. So kind of essential technology trend to be aware of. And then the demand for security and privacy. These days, the GDPR out of the European Union has caused a lot of, brought a lot of attention to privacy, you know, and just the fact that, you know, you need to deploy sites through HTTPS in order to be flagged by modern web browsers as reliable. So those are trends that, you know, I've spent a lot of time writing about that I think are worth mentioning. And then, of course, the transition toward semantic web and linked data technologies is something that we're seeing more and more in library systems. So those are trends, but what are the implications for that in the topic at hand, which is kind of professional development and skills? So what does that tell us? If the world is moving toward software as a service, it means that that is kind of where you ought to be looking to increase your skills in the future. That the day, today a lot of technology professionals are involved with things like Unix system administration, network configuration, hardware upgrades and maintenance and all of that. Those skills are, I want to say in a way, less needed as the world in general moves towards software as a service, where you're not managing the backend infrastructure, you are not even aware of the components that reside within that infrastructure, but you're deploying it and configuring it all through web-based interfaces and consoles and kind of back office configuration tools. So that's where your skills need to be today. Are you understanding, getting new knowledge regarding how basic infrastructure services work? Do you understand the different components of offerings such as those from Amazon, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and others like it, so that you have the ability to, deploy technology-based systems that are reliant on that kind of infrastructure. These days, especially, understanding about containers and Docker and how you orchestrate containers to work together as you assemble technology and environment. That's part of the vocabulary today that's important to be aware of. Shifting away from the kind of older view of services-oriented architecture to microservices architecture, which is similar and different at the same time. But when you look at modern, newly deployed, global technology services, they're increasingly either being built out of microservices natively or are migrating to that architecture over time. So, that's part of the vocabulary and the concepts and training that I think is important to kind of be aware of as you develop your technology skills, so that you're aware of kind of this new conceptual view of computer architecture. And then naturally, in the library world, we're used to dealing with metadata in terms of MARC records and the details of that. But increasingly, we're in an XML and linked data world where everything operates through APIs. The language of that is almost always JSON, some variety of XML, and that the embedded and native metadata schemes within these web-based systems are increasingly exposing content through schema.org, through BibFrame, and other kind of linked data and structured data, microdata, whatever have you, methodologies that make information discoverable by other machines, in addition to presenting it for view by humans. So we're in a transitional time, I would say. You need to understand both sides of technology, because also depending on what part of the world you're in, the adoption patterns are different, and your organization may be one that isn't necessarily ready to move to the next generation of technology, but needs to stay with current technologies for a longer time period. So you really have to know both. You have to maintain and increase your skills of the sort that I mentioned a minute ago, in like Linux system administration, server network infrastructure, low-level programming languages. The need for those isn't going to go away immediately, and not even in the middle term. These will continue to be valuable skills that you will maintain as you think about some of the concept and skills that are associated with the software as a service, microservices, and so forth. So it's consistent with the theme of having to evolve your knowledge and your career over time. So it's important to continually work on advancing your skills. And different people do that in different ways. And it's important to not, have just one way of learning, but to learn the way that works best for you. All of us have our preferred learning styles. There are some of us, I would put myself in that category, that I like to figure things out on my own. So self-learning, kind of coming up with a project, using a programming language to do something is the way that I learn how to program in that particular environment. But that's not true for everyone. Others really want to be able to take a course and be able to systematically have someone explain, the fundamentals and the finer points of any given new concept, programming language, operating system, or what have you. Tons of online training tutorials are available where you're not in a formal course, but you're able to work through a tutorial on your own. And on-the-job practical experience, I think, is always great, where you're given a task to do and figure out how to do it, figure out the tools you need, and go and do it, either individually or within a team. Working within a team is just so important these days, where you're not just a solo person responsible for everything, but that you're part of a team of shared responsibility. So again, just to say that you got to keep up with the trends. And how do you do that? As I said, things happen and change all the time. And so you're busy with your job. How can you possibly keep up with all of the new information, that you need to accumulate over time? So here, it's just, I can give you a few tips, but it's mostly to be aware and to make the effort to do it. Take the time, a little bit every day to kind of monitor the news and, the business computing arena, the consumer computing arena, and then, how that is happening in libraries as well. So, there are a lot of things happening in the realm of scholarly publishing, pay attention to that. How are educational institutions changing? What are the current issues there? And then how are these being implemented in libraries that have to do with, those other sectors? And then pay attention to the vendors and the products and the press that has to do with the library specific applications, technology, and services that you need to consider for your library or that you are using in your library. So again, through Twitter, Facebook, news magazines, all those kinds of sources to be able to understand the current and emerging trend so that you can make, the strategic decisions related to those technologies for your organization. One of the things that I do every year is publish the library systems report that I hope helps in that arena to give information professionals in the US and throughout the world, really, information on what's happening with, the library specific companies and products and systems that year. So when it comes to implementing technology for your organization, again, it's important to have the right balance and to do it all in support of the strategy of the organization. Whether you're the decision maker or helping, or you're providing feedback to decision makers, it's important that you have awareness of the strategic direction of the organization so that you can say how this particular new component or system or service will help in that direction. There's always the issue of, do we go with something that's tried and true, or we want to try something kind of new and innovative? You know, what is the level of risk-taking that's appropriate for your organization? You know, how can you experiment with technology in ways that will kind of help you as an individual technologist and your organization kind of understand the possibilities of some of the new systems and services that potentially might be of interest to your organization. So find ways to be experimental, and then when those experiments show promise, find ways to incorporate them into the strategic technology infrastructure of your organization. And I would say that don't expect success every time. You know, if you if you try out 5 new things, maybe one of them will be, yeah, that's the one that I think makes sense for us to use in our organization. So, it's important to be careful, but also to take risks in ways that help you learn without causing risk to your organization. I already mentioned earlier that, you know, there's not just one way to come into the library technology profession. You might come into it from the technical point of view. You might come to it through a more traditional library information science degree and so forth. You know, and there's just lots of different combinations of skills and career patterns that are viable. I don't want to make any kind of judgment or presumptions about, you know, what background you have to have in order to be a successful technologist. Being involved in technology covers a wide range of options. You know, what level of technical expertise do you need to have? If you're managing technology but not doing it day to day, do you need to know how to code and be a programmer? So you need to think about what the right personal toolkit you need to have within your skill set. You just need to understand kind of higher level architecture, kind of the functional requirements of the technology and software, or do you want to work toward programming and engineering level of sophistication in your technology career? So let's say you think that you need to learn to code. You need to have some expertise with programming and software development. I would first say that not everyone who deals with technology needs to have this level of skill, but I can't think of any time when it's not helpful. So it's always not in the essential category in some cases, but it's nice to have. The more that you understand a bit of coding, the more you'll understand how technology works, and you'll have a good perspective on how to apply and administer technology at a different level. And there's lots of ways to do that. I put a quick example here, Code Academy. You know, they specialize in helping especially younger individuals kind of get a start at learning to program and write code. If your organization does develop applications internally, then there's a vast number of roles within that that process that need to be there in one way or another. Project managers, those who understand the architecture of software and can make decisions regarding the pieces and components that will comprise an application, those who develop the software, software engineers who are able to kind of work with kind of deep code in order to be able to implement components within a specific technology architecture. And then those who do the quality assurance and testing to make sure it all actually works when it's done. And those that will be involved in implementing it once completed, when it's ready. And all of these roles are organized differently depending on the architecture, and the microservices approach, for example, combines a lot of these in different ways than the traditional software development approach. So if you're going to be a manager of technology, then what are some of the roles and skills that you need to be aware of? You know, as a manager of technologists, you know, you're the assistant director, you're the department head, and you have a lot of programmers and technical staff working for you. You know, your job is to manage budgets and peoples and project, but you also need to have other skills to support that. Just good interpersonal skills. I mean, that I think is the magic that it takes to be a good manager, is having kind of the right approach with people to be able to work with people of all different backgrounds and personality styles and ethnic groups and gender, kind of all of these issues that are important when you're working with a team of individuals toward a common purpose. Then how much technical knowledge you need to have, at least the high-level strategy, and the more you understand the technical details, the better. And again, different organizations have different organizational hierarchies. So, you know, how you know that your position will depend on your organization, but I think that, you know, there's some commonality as well. You know, you're helping the library or your department meet its organizational goals. You're being asked to manage resources responsibly, like live within your budget and don't overwork your team members and so forth. But the part that I want to emphasize is the way that you engage with those that you work with, especially if you're in a leadership position. To be a positive example, you know, to be an advocate for the individuals that you work with, especially when they report to you. That in a way, you know, you've hired them, so to speak. They have a responsibility to you to do their work, and you have a responsibility to them to help them be successful in their work and to advance. I think that an important aspect of leadership is to facilitate the advancement of the folks that work under you, and to kind of help them with kind of this professional development process that we've been talking about in the context of this webinar. Sure, you want to advance, you want the people under you to be successful and advance as well. If you're responsible for projects, you need to understand kind of current project management, organizational styles. The world is moving away from what tends to be called the waterfall approach, where you take a system and you build it out with all of its multiple modules and requirements and get it done. You test it and then you release it. The world is moving toward agile methodologies, and it's just not in technology. It's in a lot of other kind of even non-technical projects where it's based on iterative development. You get the minimal viable product done, something that does something that's useful, and then you build on that a bit at a time with kind of all the testing and all of that involved in each of those cycles, so that, you know, you have kind of a faster pace, a lot of sprints that are done toward the longer goal, instead of, you know, just this massive project that, you know, you don't know until a year or two later if you were successful with any of it. So I think agile is part of the vocabulary and, you know, increasing methodology that you see in the technology arena. So you want to help your organization itself strengthen its capacity for technology. You need to think about what new people the organization needs to have to deal with current technology trends and architectures and systems and so forth. You need to make sure that the organization is providing training and support to both those who manage technology and those that use technology, and then to acquire the technical infrastructure that makes sense for the long term. Kind of guide the organization toward a modern technical infrastructure over time. And it's rare when that can be done all at once. It typically in libraries and related organizations, you don't get a ton of money all at once to redo everything, but it's important that these little changes that you make over time are working toward a strategic direction that will ultimately reflect a modern infrastructure. You need to provide advancement and educational opportunities within the organization to have pathways, if possible, that an individual can work through to advance within the organization. To have opportunities for individuals to participate in governance of the organization through committees and all these kinds of things that libraries are great at having, but even more important to develop mentoring relationships where individuals within the organization know that they can turn to you and count on you to help them in a positive way advance through their career. Do you have some kind of tenure and promotion system so that if you meet the right benchmarks, you can advance within the organization and advance within your compensation package and that kind of thing? So it's helpful when those opportunities are there. And again, this is consistent with what I said earlier, is that you need to think about how you are advancing in the broader profession and how you're providing opportunities for those within your teams to similarly advance by providing opportunities, encouragement, and time to be involved with the broader profession. And you can do that at all different levels. Again, it depends on your region. Are there local, national, international associations that you might want to join and participate with? Lots of opportunities to do professional and technical writing to get recognition in that way, and to kind of share the knowledge that you've cultivated, and to develop a network of colleagues within the profession, both within and beyond your institution, that will kind of be your colleagues as you go through that. So I know in the areas that Nasej serves, that the Special Library Association, their Gulf chapter is an important group to be involved with. I've been to a few of those conferences. There are others I know internationally and within the region, but then, how you develop your portfolio of research and publications will help. And then if you're able to extend your expertise to other organizations, consulting for a local library, kind of developing your expertise more and helping, neighboring institutions can always be a good thing. As you participate in conferences, be an active participant, attend the sessions, become a speaker and presenter, and then work on developing this important network professionally, of folks that you meet as co-speakers and so forth as participants within these conferences. You know, this personal library organizations are very personal and people-oriented, so developing networks is one of the most important things, pieces of advice that I can give you as you think about your career. So don't just participate, but get on the program, you know, find something to say, you know, and find avenues that enable you to do that. To have a kind of research and learning agenda. Think of the concepts that you think are really important to you, that you're passionate about, that you want to learn more about, that you can then do more research on, and you know, focus your professional career in that direction. What am I going to speak on? What are some ideas of articles that I might write that would generate interest, and so forth. So kind of do all of that in a strategic way that will help you meet these kind of broader professional goals that I've been speaking about the last few minutes. To develop, you know, we often hear developing a personal brand so that, you know, you're known for this aspect of specialized information. You know, your niche is this, so that, you know, you have become an expert. I think that's, you know, great when you can do that, and then to, in a way, promote yourself. But if you get, you know, make sure that it's within reasonable bounds, so that you're not just seen as promoting yourself and at the expense of others, but ways that kind of put your name out there as an opportunity and so forth, that might lead to you know, to new projects and opportunities and so forth. So yeah, you want to have a personal identity that's tied to your profession, to what you know and what you do, and your accomplishments as part of, you know, the stepping stones of your professional career. How you engage with social media is part of that. Facebook, Twitter are the ones that I mostly deal with, but there are plenty of others as well. LinkedIn is an important professional network. But it's important to think about those as your public professional presence, in addition to kind of fun and personal kinds of tools. So just think strategically about which social media platforms you want to be on, if any, and then if you are, how are you going to use those in ways that generate a positive and professional image of yourself. Now, what I want to close with is this concept that I think is really important, and a lot of the individuals I talk to when they ask me about professional development, you know, this is the one thing I often emphasize, is to find their niche. Is that, you know, of all the things that are all the topics and issues and projects, you know, there's a lot of them to choose from, but find one that you're really passionate about. One that you're willing to kind of dig in deeper, to learn as much as possible, to become the go-to person in that area. Sure, you need to know a lot of other things too, but to develop most deeply in this one niche that will kind of provide opportunities for you within your institution in the broader profession, you know, that will help you advance your career. And also keep in mind that that niche may change over time. Some of, you know, my early niche that I had 20 years ago barely exists within the library technology realm, and I've had to find kind of a new niche that I wrap my career around since then. So don't be so locked in that, you know, you become obsolete, but make sure that you have an area of specialization that's current, that's relevant, that's exciting to you, that you can help share information with others about. So that is the end of my kind of prepared outline, and I think we have time for any of your questions. So I'll be delighted if you would ask questions of these topics or anything at all, really.
Thank you so much, Marshall. And as usual, as I see you most of the time, that they are able to shorten it a lot of knowledge in a very concise time. Today, I see you as a librarian community family doctor, because I think you give a diagnostic prescription, if we can say that, for an old renewal question that most of the librarians talk about it or ask it, which is how we can cope with this very speedy technology to keep our chair warm in our libraries. Especially that most of the people just thinking that once there is a technology there, there is no place for the human being. I think that you describe it very well by listing and identifying very well the requirement, the competences, the qualification need for the 20th century librarian. Again, I would like to thank you, and I need to open the question time for anyone, and I would like to prefer just to write down this question, and in order of coming this question, Marshall will answer it. So please go.
So I see we already have a question. It says, regarding Alexa as an Internet of Technology tool for libraries, do you think Alexa has a future for the Arabic content? So I think so, but I don't know how soon. You know, one of the things that I noticed with both Google Home, which I have, and Alexa, is that they're initially developed in English, and then they add other languages over time. I'm aware that those platforms now deal with Spanish, and I don't know about Arabic yet, but I think that we live in a global realm, and all of these technologies are designed to work across many, many languages. So even though I don't know the specifics, I would think that yes, there will be a time when they're available in Arabic. It's one of the most spoken languages in the world. I don't see Dr. Abla. Okay, you're back, but I don't hear you. We have time for maybe another question or two. Okay, so there's a new question that's come up. How can we change libraries into modern institutions? If I understand the question correctly, so it's a hard question. You know, libraries are very large ships with small rudders sometimes, so it's hard to make changes. You know, if you perceive that your library isn't as modern as you wish that it was, then you know, these are changes that, as I said, that happen over time and not necessarily all at once. But you can chip away at it. Yeah, you can present a vision. You can help direct the library toward modern technologies, if that is your role in the library. That will help it, you know, meet the needs of its community members better. But really, it's something that has to change over time. It's a cultural aspect of libraries. Libraries tend to be relatively conservative institutions that don't that want a low level of risk. So it is a challenge. If you perceive your library isn't as modern as it should be, how can you steer it to become more modern? You know, again, it would take not a lot of knowledge about your specific institution to be able to really respond well.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, good.
Another question has been asked: how can librarians get some important technologies without studying it? I'm not sure I really understand the question, but maybe it's like this. So if you don't have a formal background in technology, how can you gain access to these new and upcoming technologies? I would say that, especially in this time where a lot of the new systems are being implemented through software as a service and so forth, you don't have to have as much technical knowledge as maybe in the past. So I guess I would suggest that even for a person with a non-technical background, technologies today are more accessible than you think they might be. You can work your way through them without having to know the real kind of deep technical side of technology. Does that help? But the more you learn about technology, the better. So what's your starting point?
Okay, tell one of our respective attendees have a question. I have a question. I need to take the opportunity to ask it for Marshall. If we can consider it as a philosophical question, from where the role of librarian or modern librarian, as you call it, and to start the IT guy in the library. Okay, start. That's mean that, in other words, the librarian that you said that he supposed to adopt many technologies and be qualified enough to use it in his daily work. On the other side, there is another guy in the library called the IT specialist or the IT manager. He has also awareness of deep awareness, I guess, with the technology. The dilemma that all the libraries have it, this, not competition, but at least this argument between these two type of people. So how we can help librarians to cooperate in a way that not threaten or not give this feeling of threaten from the engineering or the IT engineering. Because most of the time this argument popped up on this one.
Yeah, I would say it's a tension, right? There's always the tension between, say, in an academic setting, the university IT department that manages the infrastructure of the institution, and the library that needs to be able to provide its content and services as best it can. And the IT folks in the library are often limited by the policies and technology configurations that the campus IT folks want to do. If you're responsible for enterprise IT, you got a real concern for security and access to things. If you're in the library, you want to be able to provide free access to information. So there's a tension there, and that tension requires conversation. So both sides of that tension are working toward the same thing. They need to provide technology in support of the institution. One's thinking of it from a broad university point of view, for example, and the other is thinking from a library point of view, but they're both part of the same organization. So I think the main thing is for the library side to kind of have this conversation with the university side about, it's kind of values related, that we have, in order to do our job well, we need to provide open access to information with as few barriers as possible, and to do it with privacy and security. And so work toward agreeing on those, and then once you kind of get each other's point of view, then you can start working out specific solutions. But I've seen this time and time again, and it doesn't come easy, and sometimes it's an ongoing point of frustration.
Okay, we have 3 questions down there, so please, Marsha.
Okay, so that is that one. How to successfully use technology in libraries is another question that's been asked. You know, that's a really broad question. You know, you have to think about, experiment with, and eventually deploy the technologies that make sense for your library. What are the pain points? You know, what about your current technology environment isn't working? You know, what are the gaps? So success is the success of the organization. You know, technology itself is never successful. It's, you know, what is the right technology that supports the success of the organization? So again, it's important to keep the focus on how it's supporting the organization and not on, you know, the technology, you know, product or service in and of itself. You know, of course, there's different levels of quality and functionality and so forth, but you know, you want to focus on how it's helping your organization be successful in meeting the needs of its community, its students, its faculty, and so forth. So another more specific question: what do I think of Folio and library services platforms? So it fits into some of the things that I said in today's talk. I talked about the kind of broad move of academics from integrated library systems to library services platforms, seeing that globally, you know, United States, Europe, a little bit less in the Arab Gulf region at this point, but it's a broad trend. And so I also talked about the coexistence of proprietary and open source alternatives to any type of software. And Folio is an open source alternative within the library services arena. So yeah, it's important, it's relevant, it's new. So new, it's not been implemented at all yet, but approaching kind of final development. And I think they're talking about having implementations later this year. So what do I think about it? I think it's important. It's worth paying attention to. It's consistent with, you know, broad trends in the library information space. So, you know, keep your eye out on it. You know, I think that it's something that will be, you know, that is already being discussed widely and will be more real than that in the coming months, I think. So don't want to say, you know, I've been trying to avoid kind of specific brands and companies and products in the course of the conversation, but I think it touches on the broader topics of, you know, cloud-based computing, library services platform, open source software, proprietary software. So it's all part of that conversation.
We have another question, I guess. I hope this one is clear enough.
Which one am I looking at? About the ebooks?
Yes. It's
okay. So someone is asking, do you think ebooks will replace printed books with technology? My answer is no. I think that print and ebooks will coexist for as long as I can think about it. The proportions will vary. The context will vary. In some, it will depend on the discipline, and the context and the region. So there may be some areas, health sciences, for example, where the important current professional content will be published exclusively through electronic articles and books. So, you know, you don't expect to see a lot of printed monographs and textbooks in current medical science. But in humanities, literature, history, that's not the case. And in casual leisure reading, I think that trends show that individuals continue to prefer to read in print for leisure reading. And so I think public libraries will continue to circulate printed books for a long time. So yeah, I think it's kind of the way of the world in technology, is that as new things come to fore, ebooks, for example, the old things don't ever go away. It's cumulative. And that's what makes library systems hard, is that we're not going to ever see an all-digital library. We'll be dealing with hybrid libraries for the duration, and the hybrid may include new things beyond what we're talking about. Today we have electronic articles, we have ebooks, we have some print journals, like especially in architecture and art. We have printed books. In the future we may be circulating holograms or other kinds of technology-based media that don't really exist yet. So that's the difficulty, is that nothing ever goes away, but our systems have to be able to manage and provide access to complicated multi-format collections. That's what makes working in a library kind of fun and interesting, is that, making all those different things work all at once.
And if you allow me to add, Marshall, now the augmented reality give that chance now to make this merge between the book, the printed book, and also this high tech about this one.
Yeah, so okay, it all runs together, sure.
Yes, yes. So I think we done now, because we exceed the time with more than 10 minutes. So I would like to thank you all for attending this session, because I think this is giving the value, and for sure I am repeating my thanks to Marshall Breeding, because having him in any event, giving a value and giving more knowledge. Thank you so much, Marshall, and we expecting more and more webinars from you on the future with Naseej Academy. And also I'm inviting you also to see his books he wrote and reports, because I think it's give this insight about how the wave of the technology will take us in the library field. Thanks, Marshall, again, and I wish for all of you best days. Thank you, Marshall.
You're welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you in Nashville Academy.
Thank you.